before he became a shadow on the battlefield, before his breath slowed behind a scope, before death learned his patience, he was just a boy born in 1921, in a small Bavarian village surrounded by forests where silence ruled more than words ever could. His name was Karl Weiss, a child of quiet places. Karl grew up where cities felt distant and unnecessary. Pine trees stood like soldiers. Snow softened every sound. His father was a hunter, not a man of stories, but of discipline. In their home, words were rare, but lessons were constant. At the age of 9, Karl held a rifle for the first time. Not to kill, to learn control. His father said only one thing: if you cannot control your breath, you cannot control life. Karl remembered that forever. Learning stillness. Other boys ran. Karl waited. He learned how long a deer would pause before moving, how birds sensed danger before seeing it, how the forest spoke if you listened. Hours passed without movement, and Karl was comfortable with that. The eye that never blinked. By 14, Karl could hit targets older men missed, not because he rushed, but because he waited. He adjusted for wind without knowing its name. He slowed his heartbeat without understanding how. Neighbors called him strange. His father called him ready. War enters the village. In 1939, the world changed. Radios spoke of victories. Uniforms appeared. Marching songs echoed through villages. Germany was at war. Karl watched soldiers pass his village. Loud, proud, confident. He felt nothing. No excitement. No fear. Only curiosity. The decision. At 18, Karl was drafted. His mother cried silently. His father said nothing, but handed him the rifle he had learned with. Not as a weapon. As a reminder, patience will keep you alive, his father said. Karl nodded. That was how he said goodbye. Training, where silence became a weapon. Military training was chaos. Shouting, running, noise everywhere. Karl struggled, not with skill, but with pace, until one instructor noticed something. Karl never missed, never rushed, never panicked. Soon, he was separated from others, sent to special training, sniper training. That was where he belonged. The birth of a sniper. They taught him how to disappear, how to breathe with the earth, how to wait for hours for 1 second. But Karl already knew most of it. The forest had trained him first. The army only sharpened him. Before the war knew his name, before enemies feared the stillness, before the rifle became his voice, Karl Weiss learned the most important lesson of all. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is power. War does not create killers overnight. It shapes them, slowly, ruthlessly. For Karl Weiss, the transformation began far from gunfire, in silence, dirt, and discipline. Separated from the crowd. While most recruits were taught to charge, shout, and obey loudly, Karl was taken elsewhere. A smaller camp. No banners, no music, only instructors with cold eyes. They watched recruits closely, not for strength, but for patience. Most failed within days. They moved too much, breathed too fast, thought too loudly. Karl did none of those things. The first lesson, stillness. The first test was simple. Lie down, do not move, for 6 hours. No talking, no shifting, no complaints. Insects crawled over faces. Rain-soaked uniforms. Muscles screamed. Many quit. Karl stayed. When the instructor returned, Karl hadn't blinked. That was when they knew. Learning to disappear. Sniper training was not about shooting first. It was about not being seen. They taught Karl how to break his outline, use shadows, breathe with the wind, move only when nature moved. Camouflage suits were handmade. Mud, leaves, cloth, all became armor. Karl learned how to vanish in open fields. The rifle and the man. He was issued a scoped rifle, heavy, precise, unforgiving. The instructor said, "This rifle will tell you who you are." Karl treated it like a living thing. He cleaned it slowly, adjusted the scope carefully, learned how temperature affected bullets. Others fired hundreds of rounds. Karl fired few, but never forgot a shot. The first shot. Every sniper remembers their first confirmed hit. Karl's came during training. A distant steel target. Wind shifting. Rain beginning. Others missed. Karl waited. He slowed his breathing. Let the world shrink into the scope. One shot. Metal rang. Silence followed. The instructor nodded. No praise, no celebration. Only a note written beside his name. The moral test. One night, the instructor asked them, "Can you wait hours to end a life in 1 second?" Some recruits looked away. Some hesitated. Karl said nothing. He did not see it as killing. He saw it as inevitability. That answer frightened even the instructors. Deployment orders. In 1941, orders arrived. Eastern Front. Snow, forests, endless land, a sniper's world. Karl packed lightly. He wrote one letter to his parents. No promises, no heroics, just one line. I will be quiet. The journey east. The train was crowded with soldiers, laughing, singing, drinking. Karl sat alone by the window, watching forests pass. He did not imagine glory. He did not imagine death. He imagined waiting. Arrival at the front. The air smelled different. Cold, metallic, heavy. Artillery thundered in the distance. The ground trembled. An officer pointed east and said, "That way is the enemy." Karl felt nothing, only focus. No trumpet announced it. No command was shouted. Karl Weiss's first battle began, with waiting. The front without heroes. The Eastern Front was not like the posters. No clean lines, no clear victories. Only endless land soaked in cold and fear. Snow swallowed sound. Forests hid everything. Men disappeared quietly. Karl's unit moved at night, avoiding roads, avoiding villages. Artillery thundered far away. A reminder that death was always nearby, even if unseen. The sniper's position. Karl was assigned a sector overlooking a frozen clearing. Enemy trenches lay nearly 600 meters away. A long distance, a patient distance. He crawled for hours, inch by inch, until the earth accepted him. Branches covered his outline. Snow packed around his boots. By sunrise, he was no longer a man. He was terrain. The wait. Hours passed. Nothing moved. Cold bit through gloves. Muscles stiffened. Eyes burned. Karl slowed his breathing. He remembered his father's words. If you cannot control your breath, you cannot control life. He waited. The target appears. Near midday, movement. An enemy soldier stepped out of the trench. Careless. Exposed. Karl did not raise the rifle immediately. He observed. The man adjusted his helmet, lit a cigarette, laughed with someone unseen. Karl placed the crosshairs on the man's chest, then waited. Wind shifted slightly. Karl adjusted. His heartbeat slowed. The moment. Time narrowed. There was no anger, no excitement, no hesitation, just precision. Karl exhaled halfway. The trigger broke cleanly. After the shot. The sound was sharp, then gone. The man fell. No scream, no drama, just a body collapsing into snow. Karl did not move. He did not celebrate. He waited. Minutes passed. Enemy soldiers scrambled, confused, firing blindly into the forest. Bullets snapped through branches. Karl stayed still, invisible. The realization. Only later, when darkness returned, did the wait arrive. Karl replayed the image. The cigarette. The laugh. the fall. He had ended a life, not in a charge, not face to face, from silence. His hands did not shake. That disturbed him. Hey, the second shot comes easier. The next day, another opportunity came. This time, Karl did not wait as long. The adjustment was quicker, the shot smoother. 2 confirmed kills. The officer marked his record with a simple line. No words. Hey, the reaction of others. Other soldiers looked at Karl differently. Some respected him. Some avoided him. A man who kills without being seen makes people uneasy. At night, Karl sat alone, cleaning his rifle. He did not talk about the shots. Snipers never did. Hey, the change inside. Something had shifted. Not his morals, not his loyalty, but his perception. Enemies became patterns, movements, distances. Karl did not hate them. He erased the... By winter, the forest had learned Karl Weiss's presence, and so had the enemy. Hey, a name without a face. At first, it was rumors. Enemy patrols spoke in whispers. Officers pointed to fallen men and said, "There is one shooter here." Bodies appeared with single wounds. Clean. Distant. The enemy did not know Karl's name, but they knew his work. Hey, the score rises. Weeks passed. Karl's confirmed kills increased. 5, 10, then more. Each shot followed the same ritual. Observe, wait, adjust, end it. He never rushed, never fired twice from the same place. His rifle became an extension of his breathing. Hey, the counter-snipers arrive. One morning, something changed. Karl felt it before he saw it. The forest was too quiet. No careless movement. No exposed soldiers. Instead, patience. Someone else was watching. Enemy counter-snipers had been deployed. Men trained to kill men like Karl. Hey, the first duel. Karl spotted a disturbance in the snow. Too perfect. Too deliberate. A trap. He did not fire. Instead, he waited. Hours later, a flash. A shot snapped past his head. Too close. Karl did not move. The counter-sniper waited for confirmation. Karl used that wait. Slowly, impossibly slowly, he shifted his scope. He found a glint. One breath. One shot. The glint disappeared. Silence returned. Karl had won his first duel. Hey, living under constant death. After that day, Karl never slept deeply. Every shadow could hide a scope. Every sound could mean death. He ate cold food, slept in short intervals, moved constantly. Paranoia became survival. Hey, the toll on the mind. Karl stopped writing letters. Words felt unnecessary. He spoke rarely, laughed never. Other soldiers joked nervously around him. He was no longer one of them. He was something else. Hey, the sniper's burden. At night, Karl cleaned his rifle by touch alone. He remembered faces now, not clearly, but enough. He did not feel guilt. He felt distance. That frightened him more than fear ever could. Hey, promotion without celebration. An officer informed him quietly, "Your effectiveness has been noted." No handshake, no medal, just more responsibility, more targets, more danger. Hey, the forest watches back. By early 1942, the forest no longer felt neutral. It watched. It listened. Karl understood something then. A sniper does not just hunt men. He is hunted by silence itself. Karl Weiss had become a ghost on the battlefield. Feared, respected, targeted. And the war was far from finished. The war did not slow down. It tightened. Hey. The night that never ended. Winter nights on the Eastern Front were endless. Darkness stretched for hours, broken only by artillery flashes, flares burning the sky white, distant screams carried by wind. Karl Weiss operated mostly at night now, not by choice, by necessity. Hey, sleep becomes impossible. Karl slept less than 2 hours a day. When he closed his eyes, he still saw movement, still calculated distances, still counted breaths. Sleep was no longer rest. It was interruption. Hey, the closest call. One night, while repositioning, Karl felt something wrong. The snow ahead was disturbed, fresh, human. He froze. A second later, a shot. The bullet tore through his shoulder. Pain exploded. Karl rolled instinctively, firing blindly. Silence followed. Blood soaked his coat, freezing instantly. For the first time since the war began, Karl had almost died. Dragging himself back. He crawled for nearly an hour. Every movement sent pain through his body. Every sound felt like betrayal. By the time he reached friendly lines, he collapsed. Medics worked silently. No praise, no questions, just another wounded man. Recovery without peace. Karl survived, but something inside him did not. During recovery, he stared at walls, ignored conversation, flinched at sudden noises. Doctors called it exhaustion. Karl knew better. Back to the front. 2 weeks later, he returned to duty, not fully healed, but healed enough to kill. The war did not wait for recovery. The line is crossed. Karl's next mission was different. The target was an enemy observer, young, too young. Karl watched him for hours, laughing, eating, writing something in a notebook. Karl waited. The order came through radio. Take the shot. Karl hesitated. Then he fired. The boy fell. Karl did not feel relief, only emptiness. The realization. That night, Karl vomited behind a tree, not from blood, not from pain, from understanding. He realized he was no longer choosing survival. He was choosing obedience, and that terrified him. The soldier who doesn't talk. From then on, others avoided Karl. He spoke only when required, moved like a machine, worked flawlessly, but his eyes were different. They no longer searched. They waited. The war inside the man. Karl understood something most soldiers never admitted. The battlefield does not destroy bodies first. It destroys minds, and once the mind breaks, the body follows. Karl Weiss was still alive, still deadly, but the man he once was already buried beneath the snow. The war had changed direction, and everyone knew it. The order that broke everything. In early 1943, the radio crackled with a word no German soldier wanted to hear. Retreat. Not reposition. Not regroup. Retreat. Karl Weiss listened in silence as the officer read the orders. The room felt colder than the snow outside. Retreat meant chaos. It meant mistakes. It meant civilians. The road filled with life and death. The unit moved through villages reduced to shadows. Houses burned. Church towers shattered. Animals lay frozen in strange positions. But the roads were alive. Civilians. Old men pulling carts. Women carrying children wrapped in blankets. Boys barely 10 years old walking like adults. Karl had never seen so many eyes filled with fear. A child in the snow. As the column moved, Karl noticed a boy sitting alone near a broken fence. The child didn't cry, didn't beg. He just stared. Karl stopped. Against orders. He offered the boy a piece of bread. The boy took it silently. For a moment, the war disappeared. Then artillery hit nearby. The child ran. Karl never saw him again. Retreat under fire. Enemy shells followed the retreat like predators. Columns broke apart. Vehicles burned. Men screamed orders no one followed. Karl took position behind a collapsed wall, covering retreating soldiers. This was no longer war strategy. This was survival in its rawest form. The house. Karl and 2 others took shelter in an abandoned farmhouse. Inside, they found a family hiding in the cellar. A mother, 2 daughters, a grandmother. They stared at the soldiers like ghosts. Karl lowered his rifle. He ordered the family to stay hidden. Moments later, Soviet troops passed nearby. Breathing stopped. Time froze. They survived. Barely. Hey, the question. As they left the house, one of Karl's comrades asked quietly, "Why didn't you report them?" Karl answered without thinking, "Because they aren't enemies." The words surprised even him. Hey, the crack in loyalty. That night, Karl sat alone, cleaning his rifle. For the first time, the weapon felt heavy. Not physically, morally. He began to understand that the war had forced everyone into roles they never chose. Soldiers, victims, shadows. Hey, the face in the window. As the unit moved again, Karl looked back. In a broken window, he saw his reflection. Dirty, bearded, older than his age. He barely recognized himself. Hey, the truth of retreat. Retreat did not feel like defeat. It felt worse. It felt like admitting that everything sacrificed so far had not been enough. Karl Weiss continued walking, still alive, still armed, but now carrying something heavier than a rifle. Doubt. The city no longer had a name. Maps still showed it. Orders still mentioned it. But in reality, it was only ruins. Entering the dead city. Karl Weiss entered the city at dusk. Buildings stood like broken teeth. Smoke drifted between streets. Every sound echoed too loud. Urban combat was different. No open fields. No clear lines. Only corners, windows, basements, and fear. Civilians underground. The unit cleared buildings slowly. In one basement, they found civilians. A dozen of them. Hungry, silent, terrified. Children pressed against walls. Women holding rosaries. An old man shaking uncontrollably. Karl's officer raised his rifle. Karl stepped forward. They're unarmed. A long pause. The officer lowered the weapon. They moved on. No one spoke. The night fight. As darkness fell, the city came alive. Gunfire cracked from rooftops. Grenades exploded in stairwells. Shadows moved where no one stood. Karl fought room to room. Every door could mean death. Every window could hide a rifle. A comrade fell beside him, shot from above. No last words, just silence. The scream. In a destroyed apartment block, Karl heard screaming. Not soldiers. A woman. He ran up the stairs despite orders. In a corner apartment, he found her. A mother. Her child was trapped under rubble. Karl dropped his rifle, used his hands. The rubble cut his palms. His arms shook, but he lifted enough. The child breathed. The mother cried. Karl left without a word. What war really looks like. Outside, artillery struck again. The building collapsed minutes later. Karl didn't know if they survived. That uncertainty became part of him. The sniper. At dawn, the unit came under sniper fire, pinned down in the street. Karl spotted the flash. A window. He moved alone, climbed silently. Inside the room, the sniper was dead, but next to him, a notebook, drawings, family photos. The sniper was young, very young. Karl closed the notebook. The choice. Later that day, orders came. Clear the remaining blocks. No exceptions. Karl understood what that meant. But when they reached another basement full of civilians, he looked away, and so did the others. Sometimes survival depended on what you didn't see. The city at dawn. As the sun rose, the city burned quietly. Smoke curled into the sky like ghosts leaving Earth. Karl sat on a broken staircase. He hadn't slept. He hadn't eaten. He had aged years in one night. The real enemy. Karl realized something terrifying. The real enemy wasn't uniforms. It was what war was turning people into. End of Chapter 7. Karl Weiss walked deeper into the ruins. Not as a hero, not as a villain, just a man trying to remain human in a world designed to destroy humanity. Winter did not arrive. It invaded. The cold that kills silently. By early 1944, the temperature fell so low that rifles froze. Oil turned thick like tar. Fingers lost feeling in minutes. Karl Weiss no longer felt his feet. He welcomed the numbness. It meant less pain. Hunger becomes a weapon. Food supplies failed. Bread rations were cut again. Soup turned into water with memories of meat. Civilians suffered worse. Karl saw people collapse while walking. No sound, no warning, just falling. The snow covered them quickly. A dead horse. One morning, the unit found a frozen horse by the roadside. No one spoke. Knives came out. Men who once shared cigarettes now fought over pieces of meat. Karl took a small share. He hated himself for it. But hunger doesn't care about pride. The girl with no shoes. Karl noticed a young girl standing barefoot in the snow. Her dress was torn. Her lips blue. She didn't beg. She just looked. Karl removed his gloves, wrapped her feet. His hands burned as blood returned. She smiled. That smile hurt more than the cold. The church. They took shelter in a ruined church. Icons shattered. Candles long gone. Civilians huddled together like animals. Karl overheard prayers whispered in multiple languages. God had many names and no answers. The frozen night. That night, Karl couldn't sleep. A soldier near him didn't wake up, froze quietly, still sitting, eyes open. No one moved him until morning. The letter? Karl received a letter from home. His mother wrote, "We hear the bombs every night now. Stay alive, my son." Karl folded the letter carefully. He hadn't told her the truth. He never would. The order. An officer announced forced relocation of civilians. Karl knew what it meant. People too weak to walk. People who wouldn't survive. He helped secretly. Let some slip away. It was all he could do. The loss of time. Days blended into nights. Faces blurred. Names forgotten. Only the cold remained constant. Karl realized he hadn't prayed in months. Not because he didn't believe. Because he didn't know what to ask for anymore. The moment of breaking. One morning, Karl looked at his hands. Cracked, bleeding, shaking. He whispered, "How much more?" The wind answered. Winter continued. Relentless, unforgiving. And Karl Weiss understood the truth. Many would not die in battle. They would simply fade into... The war had become a maelstrom. Not the calm, patient hunting of the forest. Not the measured shots behind snow-laden trees. Chaos now ruled. The offensive begins. Orders came down sharply. Hold the line. No civilians in your way. Karl Weiss moved through streets filled with rubble, artillery fire, and fleeing people. Bridges collapsed behind columns. Carts overturned. Children screamed as soldiers passed. Karl didn't flinch. He observed. The impossible choice. An officer shouted, "Shoot that man. He's suspicious." Karl looked. A civilian trying to cross a street with a small bundle. Orders conflicted with instinct. He did nothing. The officer's glare almost burned him. Yet Karl survived. Sometimes survival meant bending rules. Quietly, invisibly. The enemy close. Enemy artillery was closer than ever. A shell landed a few meters from his position. Dust and splinters filled the air. Karl's world became small, almost microscopic. Every heartbeat mattered. Every breath counted. A comrade falls. Karl's closest companion, a soldier named Fritz, was caught in an explosion. 1 second alive. The next, gone. Karl dragged him behind a wall. No medic, no help, just silence. Civilians in crossfire. They stumbled into a street filled with sniper fire. Karl saw mothers shield their children, elderly men frozen in fear, and soldiers, some obeying orders, some trying to protect the innocent. Karl aimed not to kill, but to cover retreating civilians. One wrong move, and he'd be dead. The sniper duel. An enemy sniper spotted him. Karl froze, remembering years of training. He didn't move. He waited. Minutes passed. The sniper fired. A bullet hit the wall beside him. Karl adjusted. Fired once. The enemy sniper fell. No celebration, only survival. The moral collapse. That night, Karl looked at the city below. Bodies everywhere. Smoke rising. Civilians hidden under floors, cellars, wherever possible. He whispered to no one. How many of them must die before we survive? The war had become a test of conscience. The cost of obedience. Karl realized that obeying orders no longer guaranteed life. It guaranteed complicity. Sometimes the rules of survival demanded betrayal, of self, of humanity, of morality. A single moment of light. Amidst all chaos, Karl found a small child, shivering. He wrapped his coat around her. For one moment, the war disappeared, and Karl felt briefly human again. End of Chapter 9. The offensive pressed on. Karl Weiss had survived, but each victory left scars unseen. His rifle was no longer just a weapon. It had become a ledger of conscience, each shot weighing heavily. The war was almost over, but Karl knew the hardest choices were still ahead. The war was ending, but endings rarely feel like relief. The final push. Karl Weiss moved with the remnants of his unit. The land was scarred. Rivers ran red with ice and mud. Buildings that once held families were now tombs of smoke and rubble. Orders came from officers no one trusted anymore. Advance, hold, retreat, sometimes all at once. The ghosts of the front. Every step reminded him of friends lost, of civilians crushed by fear, of the children he couldn't save. He walked through the wreckage silently. No one spoke his name. No one needed to. Karl was already a ghost. A bridge too far. The unit reached a destroyed bridge, the last route forward. Enemy forces waded across. Artillery and snipers targeted every move. Karl's comrades panicked, but Karl stood still, scanned, calculated, breathed. A sniper's world. One shot could change life or death. The last confirmed kill. An enemy officer appeared briefly across the bridge. Karl's finger rested lightly on the trigger. A flash, a pull. The officer fell. The war didn't stop, but the choice weighed heavily. Civilians in the crosshair. In the chaos, Karl noticed civilians fleeing, mothers holding children, elderly people carrying what little they could. He risked exposing himself to cover them. A single shot whizzed past. Karl dropped low, heart pounding. No one was hit. For once, survival was moral. The weight of obedience. Orders demanded advance. Instinct demanded caution. Karl realized something that had haunted him since his first kill. Obedience can be deadly. Humanity can be defiant. And he chose humanity. The fall of the front. By May 1945, the Eastern Front collapsed. Karl survived. Few of his unit did. He walked through villages of ash, crossed rivers of ice and mud, saw empty streets where life once thrived. He was alone, a living relic of war. The final reflection. Karl looked at his reflection in a broken mirror. The man staring back was unrecognizable, beard long and tangled, eyes hollow, hands stained by the countless shots fired. He whispered to himself, "I survived, but at what cost?" The silence answered. The return home. Karl eventually returned to Germany. The village he once knew was gone. Families scattered. Neighbors dead or displaced. No medals greeted him. No parades. Only the memory of snow, blood, and silence. He kept his rifle, not for battle, but as a reminder of what war demanded, of what survival required, of what it cost to remain human. The legacy of Karl Weiss. Karl Weiss did not become famous, but for those who knew him, and those who survived because of him, he became a shadow in the ruins, a ghost in the forest, a witness to humanity's endurance, the sniper who killed, saved, and endured. The war ended, but the story, Karl's story, lived in every silent, snow-covered field, every ruined city, every quiet moment after artillery had stopped.